Here is how I sorta accidentally remade Card Wars from the TV show Adventure Time. So maybe you didn't have a good childhood and you don't know what Card Wars or Adventure Time is. Well, Adventure Time is honestly and objectively a great show about Finn and his magical dog companion Jake, and they go on all these adventures throughout the land of Ooo. Great show, highly recommend even if you're older, because I still think it's entertaining and I'm 26. So there was one episode that really resonated with people, and that was when Finn and Jake play a game called Card Wars. Now the actual rules of Card Wars were actually pretty vague in the show, but it was kind of in the essence of other card game shows like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you play a card and a magical monster or building pops up and you fight your opponent. And honestly, I remember watching this episode and thinking it was really cool. I feel like every kid would absolutely want a game where you could play a physical card and a hologram pops up. The closest thing we got was like Bakugan. So how did I actually recreate Card Wars accidentally? So for roughly the last year, I've been working on my roguelike card game about wizards called Castlemancer, and I've made a few devlogs about different features and changes. And honestly, it has gone through many iterations, from a text-based adventure game to a resource management strategy game, until finally landing on its final iteration that I really like, a roguelike deck builder similar to games like Slay the Spire. You're probably sitting there, you're like, yes, Michael, I know what Slay the Spire and Hearthstone are. How is this even remotely close to Card Wars from Adventure Time? Okay, well, stick with me here. In almost every card game, or every card game I've played, the card object has literally been just a card. In Hearthstone, it's a card with health and damage. In Slay the Spire, it's a card that has some sort of spell effect. And in all of these games, you typically drag the card from your hand and play it. And most of the game mechanics happen with the actual effect or content of the card rather than the card itself. And at first, my game Castlemancer had the same system. You'd play a spell, you'd get the little targeting reticle, and target somewhere on the map. But it felt like it was missing something unique and different compared to all of the other roguelike deck builders. And for this, it's important for me to highlight the difference between the UI and the game world in Unity. The UI is typically overlaid on the camera in Unity, and this is how I was handling the card mechanics before. All of the cards were overlaid on the camera. You would drag them out and the targeting arrow would then show up in the game world. So there was a clear separation between the cards in your hand and the corresponding effect in the game world. Now, after watching some videos, I started to think about what it would be like to instead move all of the cards into the game world as actual sprites with colliders and rigid bodies instead of just a UI image representation. So I moved the cards into the actual game world, but tried to replicate the feeling of having them in the UI as much as possible, as that's still the primary interaction you have as the player. But what's the actual benefit of this? Well, going back to what I was talking about before, other card games use the mechanics and the content of the card for the main gameplay. But what if I could add another layer onto that? What if I could make the physical act of playing the card also a key factor of the gameplay rather than just as player input? And since now that the cards are physical objects in the game world, this was much easier to actually implement. So instead of playing a card and it just disappearing and then the targeting arrow shows up like in so many other deck builders, the card itself is the main mechanic. I added a bunch of effects to give the illusion that you as a player are physically dropping a card into a magical world, and anything hit by this card is ultimately affected by its content and mechanics. But I also added summon cards in addition to spell cards, so you can summon allies and buildings across anywhere in the map depending on your strategy. And the cool thing about cards, also taken from real life, is that they can be rotated. So I added in the ability to rotate cards, which obviously changes the impact dimensions of their collider when you drop it, but also changes the actual effect of the spell. I'm calling the two orientations neutral and active. For example, if you play Fireball in the neutral position, maybe it does 100 fire damage. But if you play Fireball in the active position, which it being rotated, maybe it does 50 damage per turn, but for 3 turns, adding a little bit more complexity to the gameplay. Same thing with the summon cards. Let's say if you summon a knight in neutral, maybe it'll have more defense, but if you summon the knight in an active position, it'll have more attack. And since actually implementing the system, the interactions of actually playing the cards have been much more fun and feel a lot more impactful. I also feel like the system leaves a lot of opportunity for expansion with different mechanics, since the cards are now physical game objects rather than just UI representations. So after integrating this, I sat there and I was like, oh my god, I kind of recreated Card Wars from Adventure Time a little bit. And mostly on accident too, because I was literally just trying to make the card playing action more fun and interactive. And there's awesome creators on YouTube who have literally recreated Card Wars on purpose, but this was really fun to accidentally arrive at this sort of mechanic just sort of through experimenting. I'm curious though, what do you think of this new card play system? Also, you should definitely wishlist Castlemancer over on Steam. Thanks. And if you want to make your own version of Card Wars, this video's sponsor Brilliant can help. Brilliant is where you learn by doing, which is my favorite way. They have thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and more, where each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that let you actually play with the concepts. Brilliant helps build your critical thinking skills through problem solving and not memorization, which in the end ultimately helps you just be a better thinker. And if you're an indie game dev like me, you're probably short on time. Well, Brilliant helps you build real knowledge in just minutes a day, with fun lessons you can do whenever you have the time. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/biteofmichael or click on the link in the description below. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you to Brilliant for supporting the channel. Thank you all for watching. That's all from me. We do a bad British accent at the end of every video. Let me know what you thought and wishlist Castlemancer over on Steam. That's all from me, and hopefully I see you in another one. Bye-bye.